One build to rule them all. That's right, Helldivers. The name of the game today, kill them all. We're going to be making one loadout, one build to handle each of the factions. There will be no flex picks. There will be no alterations. It's just one build that's going to basically decimate every faction, reliably handling everything they have to throw at you currently. But before we get into the build, y'all, bring out your freedom fingers. Start typing away in the comments. I want to know your one loadout that you will bring against every single faction. No changes. Just put it all down there in the comment section. No long intro today. Let's just jump straight into it with the equipment. Now, jumping into the equipment section here. Well, son of a bitch, Nomad, you just said you weren't going to make any alterations. All right, I maybe fibbed a little bit. In the equipment section, I will basically have a poor man's version. What do I mean by that? Well, somebody who doesn't have all the war bonds unlocked. I will give, some suggestions there. But I feel like that's only fair because, we do have new players. We got the middle players and we got the veterans. So that's the only time I'm going to talk about a little bit of alterations. So starting off, primary weapon. My recommendation for you veteran players is the Purifier. I'll give an honorable mention to something like the crossbow and the arc blitzer, but the Purifier, really easy to use, very, very powerful in general, and handles a lot of the chaff, just all on its own. We'll break down how it handles each faction later on. So moving to the secondary, we're going with the Redeemer. Old reliable here. This thing is a great run and gun, just spray and pray, kills like 2, 3 if you just absolutely go ham with it. But if you need to use it a little more conservatively, you can change it to that semi-automatic fire, and it'll go the distance. Now, when it comes down to the grenade, I want kind of area control for chaff. So I'm going with the incendiary grenade, the one with the fuse, not the impact version. The fuse version actually does more damage, and I think I'm getting more in line with letting grenades cook and kind of changing to that playstyle. I used to be all about the impacts, but now I like the fuses all of a sudden. I don't know. And then when it comes to your armor perk and your boosters, I'm never really gonna tell you what to pick here. Really anything, whatever your playstyle is. The armor perks, they really don't make or break a build, and really we all are playing like fashion Helldivers, so just pick whatever armor you want. It's not that important for this build. And for the boosters, always fill as your team needs. If you need a little bit of help, you can see my booster tier list that I don't have up. Anywho, now I mentioned a poor man's version. So if you do not have, say, the Polar Patriots Warbond, I would go with the Liberator, Penetrator, and the Redeemer. The Liberator Penetrator is basically the only alteration I'm going to talk about. The Liberator Penetrator is like a solid workhorse weapon. Medium penetration, does enough damage. It does pretty good damage, but it also has that scope. It's easy to control. It's an all-rounder. It's always like a baseline I go to when I just feel like using an assault rifle lately. But that's only if you don't have something like the Purifier. And so that is it. That's the only alteration we're going to talk about. That's if you don't have, again, Polar Patriots. So we can move on to the stratagem section, where this is like the bread and butter of the build overall. So first up for the stratagem. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Am I going to make maybe some Quasar Cannon fans a little bit angry, because that is not my stratagem weapon pick. Although the Quasar Cannon does have unlimited ammo and it punches pretty hard, I just do not like that freaking charge up time, and it feels bad to miss a shot and say, oh, don't miss your shots. Well, guess what? I miss my shots. Not all the time, but sometimes. And also, what really bugs me about the Quasar Cannon is it does not one-shot something like those Gloom Nest or the Shrieker Nest. It takes like 2 shots. In between charges, that just feels silly. So the stratagem weapon we're going with is goddamn right, it's the recoilless rifle. Now, this thing does not shoot rockets or missiles, it shoots actually shells. It's like a cannon. I had that explained to me when I did my intro from whatever video ago. So, recoilless rifle. This thing is your heavy hitter. Every heavy target, every massive target, this thing absolutely decimates them. We'll talk a little bit more about the recoilless rifle as it compares to each faction later on. So let's move on to the next stratagem pick, which is the Eagle Strafe and Run. This is going to be your more spammy, chaff clears out a lane in front of you in a parallel fashion. This thing is a workhorse. It is a very good heavy hitter as well. That first initial burst and then just boom, 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 boom. Really, really strong. I really like the Eagle Airstrike. I have changed my tune about it, and that's mostly because I would always take something like a AMR or an MG, and so I wouldn't need another chaff clear stratagem. But now, since we're talking more about a heavy hitting stratagem weapon, it's good to have some chaff clear. So what is the ultimate chaff clear though? You might be asking yourself. Well, funny enough, that brings us to our next stratagem, which is the napalm orbital. This is your oh shit button when the chaff starts rolling out of control. And that does happen, you know, on those upper tiers more often than the lower tiers. So this thing is an absolute just floor wiper. Really, really good, especially if you have the stratagem upgrade on the ship for that extra fire damage. Really solid pick with the orbital napalm. This is, again, your oh shit button. And that brings us to our last stratagem pick. I'm going with the machine gun sentry. So I am picking basically a stratagem from each section, and I'm not doubling up on any of them. I kind of want to showcase basically a one pick from each section and it just being the complete package. Now, some of you might argue, well, hang on now, Mr. Nomad, why don't you take the Gatling sentry? Well, I do like the Gatling sentry, but that Gatling sentry does not like me all the time. And the amount of time that thing whips around and takes off my head, it gives no shits, and it doesn't warn you. There is just basically no time for when that thing starts to change its target lock and you're in the way, you're just instantly dead. The machine gun one, on the other hand, a little more polite, a little more, it goes the distance a little bit. It does a really good job at controlling chaff and taking out patrols with you, and also has a really, really short cooldown. So this is also going to help out our, with our primary. We can just throw these down to basically, ward off an area and just take out chaff and get a little bit of that map control. So those are my stratagem picks. You can see actually the stratagem picks, not a lot of that heavy or massive damage because we're relying on that with the recoilless rifle. So now let's move on to the overview section where we will break down each faction and kind of talk about the playstyle and what you need to be, I guess, targeting with your kit that we have here. So let's move on over there. Starting off with the bugs. First, recoilless rifle. Let's address what this thing can do against the bugs. Kills them all. Kills every single one of them. I'm on the heavier side. One shots chargers, one shots impalers, and one shots bile titans. No problem. It also takes out, again, their shrieker nest and their gloom nest too, whatever you want to call that, the spore spewers. Takes those all out in one shot. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, if you're using the recoilless this much, you're going to be running into like an ammo economy problem. Not really. I didn't really find myself running out of recoilless ammo like too often. I didn't really find that to be a problem. Now, if you're spamming this thing, of course you are going to run out eventually. It does happen. So you do need to plan your ammo out accordingly and maybe scavenge a little bit. But hey, that's just part of the game. But then yeah, when it comes down to chaff, you have plenty of options. The Purifier, charge up mode. This thing does a small AoE. Well, it'll just obliterate chaff after chaff after chaff. And for those heavier like chaff enemies, like the commanders, it'll stagger and stun them essentially. So you can just secure that kill in a few more charge shot. Really, really, really strong. And if a hunter pack, say, jumps on you, you have the Redeemer to just whip out. And again, like I said earlier, where you just go wild with it and spray, you're going to kill 2, 3 of them, and then before you need to reload. But it's really, really good. And then when you have, say, like bug breaches coming up, one after the other, your fire grenade there. Your fire grenade can also be used to close bug holes as well. So don't forget that. That's probably your best way to close bug holes with this build. But again, when bug breaches start to come up, your grenade is going to be able to control them. Your AoE from your primary is going to be able to control them. And then you have the machine gun and then also the strafe and run eagle to just cut down wave after wave of bugs. And if shit hits the fan too hard, then you have the orbital napalm to just level the playing field. Really, really strong against the bugs. And you are, again, with the recoilless rifle, you are handling all those heavier targets and letting either your machine gun sentry, your eagle, the napalm, handle the mass amount of chaff. So you can basically throw down any of those controlling stratagems and then just pick the targets, the heavier targets off with your recoilless rifle. So that's kind of how you match up against the bugs. Let's move on to the next faction. So let's talk about the automatons, the bots. These bastards, I hate them so much. It's fucking assholes. They're not that bad, but they are. Thankfully, the Purifier absolutely decimates the entire chaff field of the automatons. 1 or 2 charges takes out every single devastator, and those rocket striders really, really strong against those. The Redeemer, I don't think you're actually going to be pulling it out too much against the automatons just because they're really heavily armored, and then you're going to have enough distance and cover with the Purifier that it's not going to be something you rely on. The grenade, on the other hand, fire damage does work on the bots. It's just, it doesn't feel right. You do have the option of throwing that down to like cover yourself as you say tactically retreat or withdraw. Fabricators, they do get destroyed by the Eagle strafe and run, so that's a good way to destroy those, as well as your grenade. You can toss those in there. It'll get the job done. I would not recommend using your recoilless rifle on like buildings, not buildings, on fabricators. I would use your recoilless rifle on, say, those turrets that are on their bases. This thing does a good job at taking those out from a distance safely. And also with the recoilless rifle, you can snipe Hulks, tanks, factory striders, any of the air units, the gunships, take those out as well. Really, the recoilless rifle is, man, there's a reason why. The latest tier list, who knows? Anyways, on the weapon stratagem weapon tier list, the recoilless rifle is consistently at the top. It is S tier, if not just A tier. We'll talk a little bit more about that against the squids, but for the bots and the bugs, yes, the recoilless rifle is straight up S tier. It is so damn good at just taking out all the heavy hitters really quick. 1 to 2 shots, no problem. And then for the remaining of the bots units, yeah, the machine gun sentry gonna help you out there, just keep things under control. Really good at taking out, like, say, berserkers or devastators from afar. Machine gun sentry, really low cooldown, really good like little support buddy. And then for whatever reason, if you're getting overwhelmed by dropship after dropship, you do have the orbital napalm, which will equal the playing field. I don't really have that happen actually too much as far as like the bots getting out of control where I feel like I need to use the orbital. So mostly for the orbital, I'm throwing it in those bigger bases, those command bunker type areas, and it'll just basically soften up the base, taking out all the devastators and the regular troopers. But overall, against the automatons, yes, this build is really strong, really shines against, I guess, you know, like charging Hulks, lots of Hulks, take them out in one shot right to the dome, really easy, and taking out those tanks from a distance, and you're not going to have any problems. You're also going to see, when I'm basically talking about each faction, the results page from all of them. I'm getting the highest amount of kills. Now you might be looking at the kills and be like, that's actually not that many kills. Well, you got to look at the team effort and what the whole team's doing, because that indicates how the mission is going. If you get like 900 kills, that means you are pulling patrol after patrol, and you're having dropship after dropship. You're like opening up the can of worms of chaos in a mission. That's a fine play style. That's completely valid. And then the score screen should be reflecting that you have been like in that play style. But you can see in like the score screens that I'm showing up, our team was very like efficient, I would say, and we're all pretty much like sticking together as a team. Anyways, so that's why you maybe see like the score screen be like, that's not that many kills. It is, okay, just relax. Now let's move on to the squids. Now this is where you probably would be like, that recoilless rifle, not that many uses against it. And you're kind of correct. Overall, I think the recoilless rifle is probably the weakest part about this build against the squids, just because the only thing you're going to be really using it against is harvesters, obviously. Now harvesters, they on the higher tier difficulties, they can like kind of spiral out of control. Not spiral, but there can be a lot of them on the field. And thankfully, this thing will one-shot them if you hit them in that weak spot in the joint. But other than that, you're really just going to be using it to take out warp ships or those Tesla towers. They're Tesla towers. You can change this to the HE mode and take out packs of Voteless, or even overseers with it as well. So that is an option. It does work. It does a pretty good job. It'll clear up a voteless pack pretty easily. It's just, you know, it's something you really want to be saving this the ammunition. Although ammunition is also not a big deal against the squids, just because it's so abundant in the cities. So you really can just go ham with this thing. But the real shining star, I should say, against the squids with this build is the purifier. Holy heck. What I like to do with this thing, well, first off, the small AoE explosive, it just takes out like packs of voteless. I'm talking about one shot, you can get like 15 kills with one shot. It's pretty nutty, even more, you know, depending on how tightly they're packed. Overseer wise, I like to have a full charge, hit them once, that staggers and stuns them, and then just like tap the trigger with the semi mode, and it's like 1 to 2 shots and they're down. Really quick at taking out overseers, especially those flying ones, which they're very annoying. The only thing about the purifier that I say was kind of like a maybe a little bit harder to use is hitting air targets. You kind of gotta like plan out the trajectory of the beam or of your plasma shot. That can be a little tricky to get used to, so you actually don't really have, I would say, as much range as you think when it comes to shooting air targets. When they're close enough, obviously not a hard hit, but when they're in the air, yeah, that can be a little difficult. Now the Redeemer here has a very specific job against the squids, and that is ripping shields. if you don't have your Eagle Airstrike or Eagle Strafe and Run up. The Eagle Strafe and Run and then your Redeemer are probably the best way to rip shields consistently. You also have your Machine Gun Sentry also to help out with that as well. Again, all these things have the stratagem wise, they have very short cooldowns. So you're going to be using them all the time, or at least they will be available when you need them. And I don't think there's really anything better in this game than sitting in the middle of a street, planting down your Machine Gun Sentry and just having a horde of Witless and Overseers coming at you, and you just sit there alongside it, just gunning them down. You know, things get a little bit too hairy. You throw that Eagle Strafe and Run, just clears out a line of them. Ooh, feels really, really satisfying. And like I said with the other two factions, your Orbital Napalm is like your oh shit button when things get a little bit out of control. And that thing, again, equals the playing field. That's what that thing is. That's what the Orbital Napalm is basically for. Really long cooldown, but when you use it for a really bad situation, or like a situation where things are getting out of control. It's like your safety button essentially. But that is the build overall. That's how I would put together. That is my build for like my one build to rule them all. Just a really consistently strong build that you can take against any of the factions, and it'll perform and it'll do really well for you. Now, of course, with this game, everything is viable. There is probably 100 different combinations and tweaks you can make that will do essentially the same job better, if not like the same kind of like ballpark. So that's why I said at the beginning of the video, you know, get your freedom fingers out, and I want to know what your guys' one build to rule them all basically would be. But that's the video. If you've made it this far, thank you very much. Consider hitting that like and subscribe button. We are just a small Helldiver channel at the moment, so we're having a silly goose time here. Anyways, that's it for now. I will see you guys next time. Peace and take care.